Hey guys, welcome back to While You Were Cleaning. Today I have some more Dollar Tree DIYs for fall to share with you. In today's video, we'll be putting together 3 different fall decor DIYs, and these are a little bit more of a farmhouse style or modern farmhouse decor style. So if that is your home decor style, or you just like to fit in some of those touches for fall, I hope that today's video is helpful for you and gives you some ideas to use for your fall decor this year. Thank you guys for watching today, and we will go ahead and get into these DIYs. For this first DIY, I used 2 strands of these decor beads that I found out with the fall items this year. I also just went ahead and used a stick that I found in my yard. This is about 16 inches long. And I'm first going to take the loop at the end of the strand of beads, just loop it onto the end of the stick. And then with the other end of the strand of beads, I untied the knot that was on that end. And I'm just trying to lay out my beads here so that I can see how long I want each strand to be hanging off of this stick. And I wanted to do 3 strands. So I'm just trying to figure that out right here. And then I started actually adding them onto that stick. I figured out the longest loop first, and then with my second strand of beads, I'm just figuring out how long I want the 2 shorter loops or strands that I want hanging off of this stick to be. So once I figured out how long I wanted each of them to be, I went ahead and secured them in place on the branch, and then I'm just going to tie the 2 ends of my bead strands together right here off to the side. Once I did a double knot to tie these together, I didn't want to leave ends of these strings hanging out in the middle of my strand. So I went ahead and I wrapped a piece of wire around the string, and I just fed it back up through those beads so that the strand was going through the beads and wasn't being seen, instead of just having the ends of the knots hanging out there in the middle of my strand. And you can see here it looks like it's just one large loop of beads instead of being 2 different strands put together. Next, I'm going to add on some of this eucalyptus and then also some of these cotton stems. I used 2 of each for this project. I laid out the cotton stems in place first, and my branch was as long as the stem on these cotton pieces were, and so I didn't have to trim off that stem at all. But if your branch ends up being a little bit shorter than the stems are, you might have to trim off some of that metal piece. So I first secured them right in the center, nice and tight, and then on each end of the branch, I secured them with a wire there as well. And I did do it on the outside edges of where my bead strands were to keep them from slipping off the end of the branch. Next, I started adding in those eucalyptus pieces, and I did cut these off from the main branch, so they're just a bunch of single stems. And I just started by adding them in from one side into the center and then from the other side into the center, and so that they're all going opposite ways and then meeting right there in the center of my branch. Once I had them all laid out the way that I wanted them, I went back through with some dark wire and I wired all of them in place. And I used some black wire that I picked up at Dollar Tree. It is a little bit thin, sometimes it breaks. So it's not my favorite wire to use, but it is dark, and so you can't really see it when you're using it on a project like this. So that's nice that it doesn't stand out at all and just kind of blends into the wood and the greenery piece. I also did want to mention that once I had the cotton and the eucalyptus all in place on my branch, I went ahead and added some wire to the top groupings of each of my bead strands as well, just to hold them in place where they are at the end. And here you can see this is how this project turned out, and I really love it. You could add in some pumpkins as well, and I think that those would look really great on this finished piece. Next, I have a really simple garland to put together. This is a 9-foot berry garland. I picked up this green and white one. And then I also got 2 packages of these buffalo check pattern mini pumpkins in the black and white pattern. And they have some other colors of the garland and the pumpkins as well. You could use any combination that you want. So I counted in 8 or 9 berries from the end of the strand, and then I went ahead and put a loop around the stem of my pumpkin. And then after I put the loop around, I went ahead and glued that stem in place onto the garland to keep the little pumpkins from falling off. And I just added a pumpkin about every 3 berries all the way across the garland. I do believe I used all 10 out of the 2 packages of mini pumpkins. Once I was done adding my pumpkins, I did spiral the berry garland at both ends. And then you can see here I just laid it out by itself on top of my piano, but you could add in some other greenery to this as well. Add in some other pumpkins if you would like, just to style it in a cute little way. You could also hang it off the front of a fireplace or shelf or someplace, but this is just how it looks all finished, and I really love how this cute little garland turned out. My last project for today is going to be a wreath using this bicycle wheel wreath form that I found at Dollar Tree. It is 14 inches, and onto this I'm going to add some of these floral pieces. These are kind of like a foamy, long, flowy piece that I like to use. And I did get a cream colored one and then also the olive green colored one. So I did just fold out these branches. So a few branches were going out to each side, and then I didn't cut off any branches or anything. You can cut them off if you want to, but it worked out really well just to do it this way as well. Then once I have those in place along the wreath form, I just wired them down on both ends of that middle section where there weren't really any branches, wired it around the wreath and to each other. And then I also added some wire out a little bit farther on the wreath form just to hold some of the branches to the wreath form, because they are so flowy, they'll just fall away from the form if you don't add any wire to the outside portion of these branches as well. You can also take some of these branches and weave them through the bicycle wheel, and that will hold them in place in a nice circle along the wreath as well. Next, I added 2 of these creamy yellow color wheat bushes, and I'm just going to add one going out to one direction and one out to the other, and then their stems will meet there in the center. I did try to push some of the branches down a little bit so that they fill out those stems a little bit better. They were pushed towards the top where the wheat was, but you just kind of have to bend them a little bit so that they curve with the wreath form. And then I went through and I cut off 2 pieces of wheat from each of the stems, and I'm going to use those a little bit farther out on the wreath just to branch out that wheat a little bit farther. Once I had them where I liked them right in the center, I secured them nice and tight with a piece of wire, and then you can secure them out a little bit farther as well. Next, I took those 2 wheat pieces that I cut off, and I just grouped them together, kind of bending their stems a little bit so that they went with the curve of the wreath. And then I just secured them out a little bit farther on the wreath, just secured them right to the wire wreath form. And then because they have that metal in their stems, you can bend them however you want to make them show as much or as little as you want on the outside rim of this wreath. And I did add 2 pieces to each side. Also, adding these to the outside edge makes it nice for those branches that are a little bit flowier. You can kind of intermingle them with this wheat as well, and it will help hold them in place to the shape of the wreath. Next, I'm adding some of this eucalyptus to the center of the wreath. I just used 1 branch of this, and I went ahead and cut them off from that main stem. And then I arranged them so they were sticking out to the right and to the left with all of those stems meeting right in the center there. And this makes the center look nice and full and you don't really notice all of those stems. So then I secured it in place right here in the center, and then you can secure it out a little bit farther as well, or you can just kind of bend these branches with the shape of the wreath. You can glue them in place as well if you'd like. Lastly, for floral, I'm going to add in 2 of these cotton stems. So I removed them from their package and then curved them so they went with the shape of the wreath. Lost a piece of cotton there because it fell off of the stem, but I just wired that right back in place. So just curve it with the wreath. You don't need to cut off any of that extra stem. Just kind of push that up underneath where your floral is going out to each side. And then I just kind of arrange these cotton stems a little bit going along the side so that the floral that I already had on the wreath was kind of sticking through them a little bit, so they didn't just look like they were by themselves in the center of the wreath. Once you have them where you like them, you can wire them right in place in the center of the wreath. And then I will be adding some pumpkins. So I love these cream colored pumpkins. So I'm going to add 1 package of these. And then I'm also going to add in some of these mini buffalo check pumpkins. The cream pumpkins you can just clip in place onto your wreath form or onto some of the branches, and they hold in place really well. And then if you don't like them, you can just move them to a new spot. And then for these little buffalo check ones, you could wire them if you wanted to add a little wire to them, but I just went ahead and hot glued them in place in a few places along the wreath form. You can leave your wreath like this if you would like. I was planning on leaving it like this, and then I remembered that I had this buffalo check ribbon. This is a wider ribbon and it does have a wire in it, which makes it really easy to work with to make bows. So I did make a bow that has 5 loops on it. Went ahead and added a wire to the center there, and then I fluffed it up, made sure the tails hanging off here were the same length, and just trimmed those off. And then I wired it in place on the center of my wreath on that outside edge. So I just fed the wires through so I could attach them to the wreath form, not to any of my floral pieces. And then I fluffed up my bow, and then I took those tails and I extended them out to each side of the wreath, and I weaved them through the floral a little bit so that it looked like it was just going and flowing right along with the floral on each side. This was a really fun wreath to put together, and I love the way that it turned out. And I have seen these wreath forms come back into my store, so I think it's going to be a reoccurring item that you can find there at Dollar Tree. I like it hanging the way it is with the floral all off to the side, but you could really just rotate it any direction that you would like. I hope that you all have enjoyed today's Dollar Tree Farmhouse Fall DIYs and that this video was helpful for you. Let me know down in the comments which of these DIYs was your favorite and maybe one that you're going to try to recreate. Thank you again for watching today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!